All right, we're live. We are live. All right. I know there's some people waiting already in the lobby, and I'm excited about this. So we have been able to start being consistent with SapChat, and now it is available on Spotify if you want to listen to it as a podcast. It is a great format to move from long form live video to a podcast. So as soon as we get a few more people here, for those of you listening, we are gaining viewers by the second. And I'm excited for this SapChat. This is a good one. So we have a special guest, a very dear person to me, who this is probably the most excited I've been about SapChat, is Tim McCarthy is joining us. He is waiting in the green room, and we will start here shortly. 10 people already. Chris Rab's on. Darren says, good afternoon, Nate. So we'll bring Tim on here shortly. Numbers are coming up, so we'll add Tim to the stage because I don't like to wait. Timothy's on.
Oh,
yeah,
Nate, that was fascinating.
Yeah.
It's great to listen to you.
See, humor and a lot of education at the same time. Good numbers already, Tim. 16 people. So I like to get up to about 40 or 50, and then we'll start kind of talking through it. That's kind of the goal. Is about
cool.
40.
So I can go back to sleep.
No, Jess says hi, Tim. So there's some comments coming through. Chris Rab says I love
that girl. Chris is one of my besties.
So
BFF or whatever you call it. Too old to know, but he's an exceptional human being.
All right. Well, Tim, I'm going to have you give about a 2 to 3 minute kind of an intro to yourself, the overview. It's okay if it goes to 4, but a 2 to 3 minute kind of tell us who you are, how you got here. Go.
Oh, so I've got it down to about 45 minutes. I've been preparing it, since you invited me onto the show. The thing I do when my son and I often go to Ohio State Fisher Business School and have opportunity to talk with business students. And I was thinking you and I might do the same thing that we do there, which is instead of getting everybody ready to hear for all your and my brilliance, maybe I'll give them a super quick background about the types of questions they could ask me and why I might have observations. Believe me, I don't have any answers. At 72, I've learned that, the answers still elude me. Started by losing my job. Actually started in Ashtabula, grew up Leave It to Beaver existence on Lake Erie. 10 children. I was the 9th. It's just amazing. When you live, most of us, even in Ashtabula, don't remember how physically fortunate we are. And so to have that lake right there and lots of open land and farmers and real people. So that gets me to the end of it. When I sold my first business in 2007, actually a year or two before then, I came back home. So I was here till 17, went to Ohio State, drank myself through a political science degree, and had a quick run through the corporate thing, which went very well. But at 35, with a chief marketing officer job, I got fired. 3 days before Christmas, my children were 8, 7, and 4. We had made great money, but we hadn't saved any of it. So I started my own business. 19 years later, it was in a consulting field, morphed into a fulfillment center, morphed into a media business, actually a database marketing business called Workplace Media, which we sold into private equity in 2007 for an extraordinary amount of money. About 4 years earlier than that, Timmy and I, my oldest son, had started, well, actually just 3 years. 4 years earlier, we'd formed it, but we opened the first Raising Cane's chicken fingers at the corner of High and 15th in 2004, October 27th. And 19 years later, after building 44 stores and operating with 3,000 people and really an incredible organization, we sold that. This time back to the first time I sold under private equity. Second time was back to the franchisor. We were their first franchisee. They created 7 more. And then we were their last franchisee. Because as soon as they got to 7, they realized they didn't want any franchisees. So Todd Graves and his crew kept buying everybody out. And we were the last to go, July of 2021. In 97, and this is it. Am I past the 4 minutes?
Oh, no, this is good.
In 97 is not, we weren't making money yet on the first business, but Alice and I had long believed that the purpose of our life is to serve others. And so we started a thing called the Business of Good Foundation. And for the first 5-7 years, it was funded. It's a private 501c3. First 5 to 7 years, it was funded by 25% of anything we made in pre-tax profit, which we finally started making money even before maybe that's why we sold it. And then when we sold, we put an enormous amount in. And then when we sold Cane's, we put another enormous amount in. And so in an increasing way over the last, 97 from 25 is, 28 years, I've become more and more involved solely in the Business of Good Foundation. So quick is we try to serve those who serve the poor. And the only poor we try to serve is the working poor, the people who are not able to retain the fruits of their labor because they just live paycheck to paycheck. And the primary things we're involved in is lending to unbankable entrepreneurs. We've done that for a long, long time. And the other thing I'd say is we do social enterprise. Funding those. We have an incubator. And then the other big thing we do is we try to help first generation and low income kids that get into college to get through college. As people don't realize, we get them to college because it's so exciting to get them there, and then they drop out. So here's the things that you can ask me and Nate. You can ask Nate and I, how long would you guess, Nate? 10?
Over 10. We're over 10 years helping me, yeah.
Yeah, so I found Nate when he had a marvelously successful $65,000 revenue company while he was working schlepping chemicals for a Canadian company. And we've had a blast. I love the guy. We've always stayed close. I made the mistake of getting too close. And we learned from that and are still best friends. So ask me about funding entrepreneurs, ask me about family businesses, because me and Timmy, ask me about selling into private equity, ask me about charitable interests or, serving others. And that's it. So I'm going to do nothing but answer questions from here, whether they're from Nathan or from anybody on the podcast.
Sure. So we've got 32 people. We're up to 32 people. I got to get, some people are coming through.
You're almost up to my brothers and sisters and nephews and
The family, the McCarthy Christmas.
not including the great nephews and the great nieces.
So any questions you have, you know, if we don't know, we don't know. We're just, you know, ask away. You can type it out, and then we can go from there. But I'm going to actually start asking Tim some questions or start moving through some things. And then if it sparks a question or, you know, you're just running through some challenges, just type it out and we'll go. So B&B Farms Maple says, good evening. And David Ducato says, Nate and Tim, thanks for hosting.
There's another exceptional mail.
Oh, man.
Ducato, not Ducato.
Ducato's already got
it's tomato, not tomato. Ducato, not Ducato.
David's got a great question. When looking to purchase a business, how do you identify those with a good exit? When looking to purchase a business, if you're going to buy a business, how do you identify those businesses or those with a good exit? That's the question.
He's got to say more, because that could mean the people that are selling to David have a good exit plan. It could mean when David buys it, he wants to have a good exit plan. Tell me which one he means.
You got that, David? We need some clarifying here. When looking to purchase a business, how do you identify those with a good exit? Is that the current business owners exiting and you taking over? Is that your exit?
Right.
Need a little more clarification. He says, got it. Hang tight. All right. So.
All right. You fill the space with one of your questions, big boy.
Chris has one.
Oh.
Ask Tim about why he makes a choice on who he spends time with. How do you make your choice on who you spend time with, Tim?
That's a tough one. I would expect it from him. Time is my most precious commodity, especially when I'm 72. I don't even buy green bananas anymore because I don't know whether I'll get to eat them. And so I can't waste my time. And so as soon as I find someone might be a terrific person and I might love them for the rest of my life, but I'm wasting my time because they can't hear me, that's how I identify. Gotcha. I just watch for, I don't ask for a lot, but if I can see a progression, you know, like I do with you, then it's worth hanging out. But if there's not a progression, then I haven't got any more time.
Well, I want to take like 2 minutes and just talk about how I met Tim. And the first time I met him, and one of the most impactful meetings I had was the second time I met him, because the first time I already knew everything and I didn't need any help. And Tim was so gracious. He said, hey, I work for coffee if you ever want to talk. And I was so more arrogant than I am now. I don't need anything. I'm an MBA and I got all this. I don't need any help. And it was probably 2 or 3 months later, Tim came to the sugar house at the family's, and I introduced him to my dad. We sat down and he goes, oh, where's my coffee? So he's got his notebook just like this. And we sit down. I need my coffee. Oh yeah, I'll get you coffee. And I get him a cup of coffee and I sit down and I'm ready for answers. And he starts asking me questions. And this was about 2 hours of him asking. And he goes, oh yeah, I know exactly what your problem is. And I go, oh really? Like, what is it? He goes, oh, can I get some more coffee? Oh yeah. I run over and I get coffee and I pour a cup and I set it down. And he goes, I go, okay, yeah, what's the problem? He goes, oh yeah, I know exactly what your problem is. It's you. And it was like I was looking everywhere. I was looking everywhere for the problem in my business. And I went home And I sat in my driveway. I cried for like 30 minutes because I finally found the problem. It was such a relief because you can't work on anything until you've identified what it was. And I thought it was this person didn't know margins and this person didn't understand sales. And that was the first moment with Tim that was the most helpful. And I tell that story because aren't we oftentimes as entrepreneurs our own problem? Sometimes we're the problem. Oftentimes.
Not oftentimes, all the time. Hardest person you'll ever have to manage is yourself.
Right.
But what was interesting from that day, because I now remember it, is the way I came to that was through, because how could I know about somebody else's business or about somebody else's life? There's no chance, right? I mean, I could know, I don't know my sisters and brothers' lives like they do. So how could I know yours, right?
Yeah.
But if you find somebody that's giving you advice without asking you a lot of questions first, don't trust them.
That's good.
That's what you made me remember. Because I remember I was overwhelmed with questions because you were so freaking brilliant.
I was going at it, buddy.
You knew it all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought I did. And I looked, and that was a relief, though. It was a relief to understand. It was a starting point of coming to the conclusion that I had been creating all my own problems, and that was healthy. So David did get back with clarification. He said, if a new entrepreneur is looking to buy their first business with the intention to grow and exit to another, how do you identify a company that would be appealing to a PE, a private equity firm? That's a good question.
So 100% of what a private equity firm is looking for is numerical. After they bought me, we had a celebration at Four Seasons in New York City, and the owner was telling me a story, and I said, well, Stuart, you know, because you're a businessman. He looked at me and he goes, I'm no businessman. I'm a financial engineer. And so the first part of the answer to David's question is pretend you're a financial engineer. If you're going to sell into private equity later on, pretend you're a financial engineer and do the things that they would do to find out, whether because private equity is no more than leverage buyout. It's a new term not a new term, but, they use your money to buy you. And so that's a simple answer to your question. How do you set yourself up so that they can use your money to purchase you? Doesn't matter the category. Does not matter the fame or the reputation or the anything. Surprising, but it does not. They are strictly numerically driven. So buy a business that you can fix and grow, that has potential for growth, and that with the kind of discipline you could bring, David, especially the other thing I guess I'd suggest you do, which I did, is get into a business because if you get into something, like Nate's pals should get into anything that has to do with maple, syrup, sugar, branded products at retail, farming, any of those things in that category that a guy like Nate and probably most of you listening have studied all your lives. That's where you want to go, because that's the place you can use your experience and your knowledge to leverage. With you, David, it's in the medical field, and so I'd look for something that's at least inside your strike zone and something that you're sure you can change the numbers on and leverage them pretty fast, because that's all private equity cares about.
He clarified a little bit. He said, I understand it can take time to grow, But similar to real estate, I imagine buying a business is like identifying the right one that will be desirable in the future. You don't want to get into printing DVD cases or DVD,
No, quite wrong. Quite wrong. It's the opposite. So we took a company that was in the printing business. That's why it struck my ear when you said that. And all we did over 5 years was we transferred them into becoming more of a, what do we call it? It even became the name of the company, but much broader than printing. It was digital printing, web printing, the whole, it was like this, right? Email, the whole, we turned it into a company that did all those things. So the reason why that was important to answer to David's question is, Warren Buffett often said, I love antiquated businesses, because if I take updating, sleepy old businesses, I think he called it. So I'd find a sleepy old printer, and I'd bring in all these digital printing people and people that understand digital media and stuff, and turn it into something exciting.
So take something that isn't seen as valuable, it's an older technology, and bring technology to it, and you've basically taken a low value asset and ramped it up to a valuable asset.
Which brings up the second point. So one of my partners loves to say is the deal succeeds, or the 18-hole game is won or lost on the first hole. I'm sorry, on the first tee. So, well, what do you mean the first tee? Well, that's when you name your handicaps. Right. Yep. So if you're buying a sleepy old medical device business, David, and you know that they're kind of resting on their laurels, or they haven't been innovating lately, or their owner is just trying to punch time to the end, means you got a damn good chance to call a good handicap on the first hole, on the first tee, which means you got a lot better chance to turn them around with, there's more leverage. Look for the leverage. Where's the leverage? Where can you grab something at a good price, add what you know to it, and make it much better than it is? People get a really wrong idea when they look for a certain size or a certain this or a certain that.
So getting into an AI business at this point, it's almost already like too late. Like it's, everybody knows, so everything's valued way up here. You're talking about taking a business that's, been around for 100 years, and it's not being used to its fullest.
Yeah. Pretty well said.
So
like a maple syrup farm.
Exactly. Maple. You take something that's been around older than the country, it's an industry that's older than the United States, and then, putting maple syrup in a bourbon barrel and just changing things. But I had been, over the last 2 weeks, writing down what I call Tim-isms. And these are quotes that I know. I'm just going to do the rated G ones, maybe PG. But the Tim-isms that I am finding myself repeating to my team, and my team is now repeating back to me too. But there's several of them, and I went through them. And one I keep saying a lot lately is, the problem isn't the problem. And with my own team, I didn't understand what you were saying at the time. I knew that based on what you were saying, we were trying to solve something, and we were trying to solve the wrong thing. And what I realize now is you were trying to help us on how to think and solve problems, not to solve the problem for us. So I think about that a lot, and I use it a lot. And now even like with my own son, my kids, and I'm like, oftentimes we're trying to solve something, and we didn't take the time to say, is this the right problem? Are we trying to solve the right problem? And how quickly you saw that, and that I'm surprised at how fast now I go, wow, I'm seeing it over and over. The problem isn't the problem.
Well, I think I would guess, especially in the audience of SAPs that you attract, the other piece of what you brought up is everybody wants to solve the problem, but it's harder to think about what was the cause of the problem. So two things are possible. One is what you said, is that you're attacking the wrong problem, right? Because it's not, it might be urgent, but it's not important. Remember the old Covey thing?
Oh, yeah.
What's urgent? The matrix.
Yep.
Not important, important, urgent, not urgent. And that's where we identify the wrong problem. But the other piece that's really interesting to me is if you're solving a sales problem because you looked at last month's sales report, you're too late.
First thing you reminded me, the first question I had is the first book that you've read, an entrepreneurship book that made the biggest impact kind of at the beginning of your business, because you used Covey, and it's like, for me, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was probably one of the most impactful books in my life. And I was wondering what book like changed how you thought. And it was probably in stages, right? Early on. So I guess early on, what book do you think had the most impact for you? And then later.
The one that would resonate the most, I have a huge list of books, and, of the ones that actually, pointed me in a different direction. But the one that might resonate the best with the people that are in your audience is E-Myth. So it's a capital E, then a dash, then MYTH. And I'll a spoiler alert. When I found you were a guy that studied since your grandfather or your great-grandfather, the maple business. And so to call you a great technician, which is what they call it in E-Myth, it'd be an understatement. Because you love the business, you love the whole idea, you love it's in your blood. You would always tell me about Grandpa's farm or great-grandpa's farm and when it started, and now it's an interchange at Route 90 or whatever. I mean, sure, I always loved hearing your stories because you studied the business. And E-Myth book is about a person who, I think she was a baker, made great cakes, and hated the owner of the bakery because he didn't know anything about cakes and was an idiot, therefore. And of course, she went out to create her own bakery, and she didn't realize, right? There was another side. She was great at making cakes. The business side, she was dumber than a stump. And that's the whole point of the book and if it's not you that can develop that other side of you, I'm a marketing guy, first, last, and always. I feel like it's in my blood. It's all I care about is finding out what people want or need and providing it for them. Mm-hmm. That's not enough. In 1995, we were named to the Inc. 500, which is the fastest growing business in America, and the bank froze our assets. Which means they closed down our business. So, it's great that I made great cakes. It was just too bad I wasn't going to be able to make any more of them. That's a big thing.
The E-Myth is right there. It's number 2 for me. The entrepreneur myth. There's 3 entrepreneurs or types, right? You have the technician, the manager, and then the pure entrepreneur, sales and marketing, right? Those are the 3.
That's it. Thanks.
I thought I was a technician until I hired Zach. He was a chef at a restaurant in Conneaut. to come in and run production. And on his first day, I built these systems and everything. And on his first day, I'm standing there and I couldn't keep up with him. And I went home and I said, honey, either I was never that good or I'm getting old, or both. I realized at that moment I wasn't the technician that I thought I was.
Right.
But at the beginning, we got to be all three, right? I think that's the point too. But
exactly.
But you need to find the two you aren't as quick as possible, and then replace yourself last. At least that's worked for us, because Jess, who's watching with her husband right now, she's the manager at Bissell Maple Farm, and she cares about vendors, she cares about employees, she cares about customers, and it's authentic and it's real, and people, you can hear it on the phone. It's in her voice. And that's like, we have the team, right? So now, recently hiring Jim, our sales rep, I'm starting to wonder if I was ever good at sales. Like, I'm like, wow, this guy has it, man. And that book. And then if
you can't grow if you can't get out of your own way.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, I think.
But you also got to get out of your own way while still maintaining control. Follow?
Yeah, somebody
you have to concentrate on the what, not the how. When you're starting and you're go and trying to figure everything out, you got to do the how, the what, the where, the when, the whatever, right? But ultimately on each thing, you still got to be aware of the what. You just got to get out of the how.
I had another like kind of impactful Tim moment. That is, when I say Tim McCarthy,
Alice has a lot of those too. Yeah.
I actually have her name.
And they're always a big regret for her.
The biggest right there is Alice, because I do want to talk about like the similarities and what type of person it takes to live with us. Like, they're not weak people. They're actually very strong and kind at the same time. And my wife, Kathy Jo is the reason Bissell Maple Farm exists. It wouldn't even exist. And I think about that often. But I don't know if you remember the time when somebody called you in, basically, Nate needs a Tim visit. And you showed up unannounced, and I'm like, oh, okay. And we walk into the evaporator room and sit down, and you go, Nathan, here's what's going to happen. Or it was, how are things going? Oh, fine. I think we're going to get through it, And that was the moment where I didn't realize like everything was crashing. And I tell people this story because I don't want my worst enemy to go through what I went through. But I now look back and say it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I wasn't going to listen to anybody. And you sat down with me because we had lost our biggest customer, and it was $1 million customer and a $2 million business. It was hurtful to the business. And you said, hey, let's take a piece of paper and a pen. And I just want you to write down the things that, let's just start making a list. And I remember I couldn't use a pen and paper. And you said, oh, this is a little more serious than I thought. I try to explain to people what PTSD, and having gone through that, and I went and saw somebody and I got help, and I hadn't slept. And I remember the counselor said, you have PTSD. And I said, I'm not in the military. He's like, no, you have a bruised brain, and here's what you got to do. And it was the first time that somebody had put me on I tell the story, it's important, an antidepressant, and I slept for the first time in like months. And it saved my life. And I didn't know, like, I always thought I could get back, like work for 4 days, work all night. And for a while, like, you could always get back, like get back to normal. There was a point where I realized finally I couldn't get back. Right. Just like, I went so far out into that water that I just couldn't get back. And that saved my life. Somebody called you, you came in, sat down with me, and then said, I think you need to go see a doctor. And I tell that story because it took us 3 years with your help and your team to pay our debt back, to put some systems in place, to get some discipline. And it was something simple like a regular meeting, which we still do to this day, a weekly meeting, and putting these things in place that helped us not only survive, but then that discipline helped us thrive. And
so if we haven't put everybody to sleep, here's the two things that your story reminds me of. Number one is mental health is a big issue for entrepreneurs, and most don't respect it. And I didn't either until 1995. When I started going to see the Shrinky Dink. 2.5 years, just in case this is a fun story, like some people think it is, 2.5 years into the psychotherapy, I asked her whether she had come to a conclusion, and she said, yeah. I said, can you make it simple for me? And she said, yeah, your two primary characteristics are you're a control freak and you're a people pleaser. I said, I'm not sure I understand. I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, you want everybody to do exactly what you tell them to do, and then thank you for it.
Totally relatable.
Oh, and I said to her, I said, I'm wienered, aren't I? And she said, eternally. That will not work. That will continue to be a frustration forever. The other thing that, if it could be helpful to your audience, is to be brave about your weaknesses. It's often overlooked, especially by successful people. I still have, I can name them for you if we had enough time. They're very substantial, and I have to work on them every day. I'm going through a big growth spurt right now, 72 years old. But I had some real difficult times in 2024. And so I've had to change I literally have to change my behavior. And in order to do so, I have to change my thinking. And that's a bitch.
Yeah. Well, somebody once said,
check your weaknesses and beware your mental health, please.
And somebody I know that happens to be on this podcast once told me, in order to stop a bad habit, you need to start a good one.
Yep.
And I won't forget that.
Yeah, it's true.
So, any questions coming up, guys? Let me kind of scroll through and see if we've missed anything. A lot of highs, hellos, thank yous. Tim speaking facts. Kevin's trying to help us. Everybody needs to go give this a thumbs up, which will definitely get picked up by the algorithms. And then more questions about working with family. And I once, you've been with me and kind of watched me bring family in. And one of the things that resonated with me is when working with family, this is a Tim-ism, you take advantage of each other.
Of course.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it's not really the perspective of the owner of the business usually.
Yeah. So two things. I'm not sure. Let me think about how to answer that while I say two things about family if you're working with your family. Number one is Tim brought it to me, not me to him. And he was only 21 years old at the time. And he said, Dad, I'd like for our new business together to not ruin our relationship. And I said, well, what do you suggest? And he said, well, I suggest that we never hold anything back. So even if I look like a stupid son or you look like a lecturing dad, if you have something to say, just say it. And if I don't agree with it, I'll stick it up your hiney. If you don't agree with it, I hope you'll stop being too nice to your son and stick it up my hiney. Transparency is the most difficult thing to do with a brother or a sister or a father or a mother or any family member in your business. It's unbelievable how hard it is to get to the truth, because there's always hurt feelings. And that leads to, you seem to like books. What was the greatest underpinning of that for me was a book called Fierce Conversations. And I can't remember her name. I'll look it up while we're talking, but
I'm pretty sure Jess Bailey has read that book. And
yeah,
I think you actually recommended it in one of your blogs. I think that's
it's
how
just
she.
the reason it's a fabulous book is because it's a way of saying things that Susan Scott, Fierce Conversations. And it doesn't. It takes less courage, not more, once you read Susan's thoughts, because you actually can be more loving, not less, by telling the truth. And we become way less. That was Timmy's point, I think, when he said, "Let's not hold anything back because it piles up, and then it piles up, and then it piles up." And we both think we're being nice to each other by not bringing it up. It's the reverse. It's the reverse. We're piling up resentment, and therefore it comes out in very stupid ways. And in family business,
reality,
10 times.
By not having that conversation, you're actually being selfish because you're
Correct.
trying to avoid it.
Correct.
Difficult conversations are hard until you practice them a lot.
And what you practice on doing, Nathan, that's exactly right. What you practice on doing is telling the truth lovingly.
I struggle sometimes.
When you get pissed, because, oh my God, I'm having the same conversation with my son or my father or my wife or my whatever, that, oh my God, how many times they're going to have you say something stupid. They just don't really mean, it's more out of frustration than anything else. But if you have the conversation early rather than late, you can do it lovingly.
Yeah.
And she gives you tools to do that. That's what's cool. Because to me, I never had the courage. I was the 9th of 10 children. I wasn't about to, and my brothers were all over 6'3" and over 250. And I was no shit. And my sisters were like the most intelligent people in the history of the world. And so I had no courage in telling anybody what I thought. I told them what they wanted to hear. And then I would hate them, for not understanding me. How smart is that, huh?
I had a question it's what made me think about bringing you on the podcast is when somebody like you or myself sees a great potential in an entrepreneur and we want to help. And I think you were talking about transmitter receiver, and I've learned something about a mentor-mentee relationship, which is the mentor doesn't get to choose the mentee. The mentee gets to choose the mentor. And when you try to mentor somebody who does not want your help, or hasn't fully, I guess, embraced you as a mentor, it hasn't gone well for me. And I've seen this.
Why do they hate me? I was only trying to help.
It's true. And I don't even know how to even back up. I don't even, I screwed up.
I've experienced it. I've experienced that one million gazillion times. I can't imagine why they hate me. I was just trying to help them.
Well, yeah.
And it's a dependency thing. It's like a lot of people, everybody in the world comes to you or comes to me or comes to any of our audience and says, I really want to change. And almost none of them do.
Yeah.
Almost none. It's a rare it's the right thing to say. Hey, things aren't working out for me. I think I got to start a new trend. I'm going to do a New Year's resolution. And so what they hope for is that you'll give them so much good advice that when they pretend they take it and it doesn't work, they can blame it on you.
That's true. Yeah, right. I mean, I've even witnessed it, Tim, with you, and where it was like, my experience with you was not what I'm hearing from others. Like I'm going, I didn't say anything. I'm like, that's not my experience at all. And they decided to go their path. I went on mine, and love these individuals, but it was like I had to like listen and go, yeah, that's not my experience. My experience has been completely different, and just keep it to myself. Like,
Can you send a question out to your listeners?
Yeah.
Because I could listen to you and me all night, but I'm really frustrated by not hearing from them. Would you ask them a simple question?
Yeah. Let's go, listeners. Let's go. We need some questions.
Just one simple. No, I'm asking a very specific question. I want you to ask them what keeps them up at night.
Oh, that is a Tim.
Nothing more than that. If any of your listeners are willing to answer, that will become the question.
I love it.
So
yeah, anybody watching, listening, what keeps you up at night? That's a Tim McCarthy 101 question.
Doesn't matter whether it's personal, business, relationship. Obviously better if it's business, but we'll get to anything.
Chris has typed out that thought that I'm not doing my best. Mark Perkins has said work. Well, they're a one-word one.
Yeah, and we're going to ask Mark in a minute, but one of the best things I found for so not feeling I'm doing my best, Chris, is all based in shame. And if it's a little shame, you got raised doctrinaire Catholic like I did. And so guilt out the wazoo from morning till night about whether I'm doing my best. And if it's extreme, then you went through a very difficult childhood. And the best person I've ever seen or read that has marvelous answers on that is Brene Brown. She's fairly famous, so probably most people know about her, but just look it up. Brene, maybe 2 E's, and Brown. She's become a pretty good, pretty well thought of writer. I, of course, won't be able to remember the title of her book, but you can get her TED Talks or YouTubes or whatever. And everything that has to do with me not thinking that I'm doing my best is sourced in shame. And that's what she talks about brilliantly, about how we all get stuck in shame.
I love this one coming here from David Hughes. You talk about a kindred spirit, Tim. You and I would never have beers with the guy. This is one of them. And I love this guy. He said, it's just him expressing, I'll just read it. Nate, you can come across a little demeaning when you are trying to give advice and makes it hard to receive.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm sure it's true. I mean, I'm not. I give information in a way in which I am okay receiving it, which is very direct.
I have the same problem. What an interesting an opening comment for your and David's relationship.
David loves me, but David, say more, man. Like, you want to talk about, like, I don't get offended by the messenger. I don't. I think that's why Tim and I have had a good relationship, because the first thing I get from the phone when I pick up the phone is, hey, dummy, or not dummy, but it's usually an insult to start. One of my favorite stories. Tim, I got this idea. What do you think? And he goes, oh, that's a terrible idea. And I go, really? Oh, it's one of those calls. Hey, hang up, call me right back, and I'll tell you what a brilliant idea it is. Listen, that's the kind of relationship I want. Like, I'm okay with
you and I come off as there's a great word for it, patronizing. And that's probably some part of what David's saying. And yeah, it's because we're smart asses. And David, we think too much of our own genius.
Oh,
so what is it about
video today is in the description. It just says Nate bloviates. That's what I did in the video. I learned that word from you, Tim.
Well, because I do it all the time. So the cat that said the one word work, what is it about work that keeps you up at night?
Mark Perkins. Yeah. Mark, what's keeping you up at night about work?
Mistakes you made, or things you should have done that you now realize, or you got a shitty boss. The shitty boss is you, which was my problem for an awful long time.
Self-employed for 45 years in the hardwood floor installation and finishing, a one-man show. Everyone is always in a hurry. So that's Mark's response. So he's a self-employed. You've been doing hardwood for 45 years, or 45 years in the hardwood floor and installation and finishing.
Right.
He's a one-man show, and everyone is always in a hurry.
Yeah. So what you haven't done, Mark, is set your boundaries. So the thing, you're probably a lot like me. You're a people pleaser. And if you're in that fine of a business and you're still around 45 years, you must be amazing at it. Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure I'd have to ask you about 12 more questions, but with the time we have on the podcast, I'd say I'm pretty sure you don't value your own work. You're proud of it and you boast about it and you love showing people the beautiful hardwood floors, but you're ashamed to price it the way it needs to be priced. Because the only answer to everybody in too much of a hurry is to price up their hurry.
Yep.
I hate to say it, but it's pretty much that. Yeah, but wait a minute, I might lose some business. So a kid that I've known since he was 12 that now is they're not married yet, so my son likes to call him my son says Mike is my sister's baby's father. So not my son-in-law yet, but probably will be. He has the most amazing business, and it has a lot to do. It has a lot to do with my answer to your question. He transports pets. It's called Dependable Driver Solutions. And, he's fought his way through the business over a long period of time. And long story short, he loves dogs so much, and he loves driving so much, and he loves pleasing people so much that he got off a call one time recently, and he was excited because he'd won a piece of business. And I said, why are you so excited? And he said, well, it's a $6,000 trip. And I said, well, what were other people bidding? And he said, well, the second highest bid was $3,300. I said, how'd you sell it for $6,000? And he said, because I don't compromise on anything, nothing. When I picked their dog or their pet, he's taken a lot of weird pets. When I pick their pet up, I will not pick up any other pet. We will stop every couple hours so that the pet's always feeling comfortable, that they can move around. I will send photos and texts back to their owner at least twice, sometimes 3 times a day, They will stay in my hotel room with me. You know, and he just kept going on with all this stuff. So I ask you, Mark, what is it that you do with finishing that nobody else would do? And I bet there's a long list. And then if somebody's in a hurry, you say, not a problem at all. If it was a $3,000 job, not a problem. I can do that for $4,500. You can get some, trust me, you can get somebody to do it probably for $2,000, but you might not like what happens. You just got to get more self-confident, buddy. You deserve to price it the way that you can do the work more comfortably. Two easy an answer. So my email's tim@thebusinessofgood.org. If you want to follow up to that because you found out how full of shit I was, feel free. tim@thebusinessofgood.org. And you can dig me deeper to find out that was too glib an answer. I'm open to your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. And 2 updates here.
Answers to what keeps them up at night?
Well, he did send an update here just now. It says he did have a heart attack 5 years ago. So maybe it's physically harder. I'm not sure, but it just, you know, I don't know if that's a result of the stress or a result of, you know, I don't know. But
so when I was on, tell Mark that I'll tell Mark that when I was on the operating table getting a heart catheterization, and Sam Wilson, the heart doctor, because I don't know if you've had one, but they keep you up and you get to watch the video. And so the little camera's running through my arteries and toward the heart. And Sam goes, I happen to know him. So he's like, oh, Timmy, that's a sweet one. No plaque there. And he'd go through another one. And wow, I wish mine was as clean as that. I said, Doc, why am I having these heart attacks or symptoms or all that? I will never forget it. And this was 25 years ago. He said, no one in the world, including me, a heart surgeon, respects the physical outcomes of stress. Yeah. That could have been your heart attack. I mean, there's certainly a lot of other things but that's why when Nate said, I wonder if it was stress, that's what caused me to tell you that story. Every one of us on this podcast has physical outcomes of stress. We just think, oh yeah, well, that's no problem, you know. We're tougher than that. Well, we aren't.
We don't respect the physical outcomes.
He couldn't. I mean, what a thing to say for hearts is. Your heart's fine, Timmy. Well, then what's the matter with me, Doc? No one in the world respects the physical outcomes of stress. What a great line, huh? So I went back to my private doc and I said, what now? Because we'd been through, that was the ultimate test, right? And he said, I'm afraid the only thing left is to work on your mind. And I said, what's that mean? He said, we're going to send you to a psychiatrist. I said, I don't believe in psychiatrists. And he goes, hey, you better start. You know?
Yep.
I said, my dad was a doctor. He always taught me psychiatrists are their own best patients.
That's right. Your dad is a doctor. So David, clarifying a statement earlier, we're jumping back a little bit to where we were talking about, you know, he says, I understand how you deliver the message, Nate, but I know others do not. And that's where they struggle with you.
It's absolutely true. Yeah. Hey, Jen, you want to weigh in on this one? Jen's watched the parade of people, just like Pat White, who was my CEO, watched a parade of people that they had one view and I just couldn't understand why they didn't get it. You know? I'm telling them as clear as I can tell them. Why don't they get it? Right, Jen?
Yeah.
Why don't they get it? Yeah,
Yep.
we're not very. It takes a certain kind of person like David to you, or you to me, you know, or Chris to me. I'm a very hard guy to get coached by, but strangely, I don't want to change that.
Yeah.
It's how seriously, it's how I weed a lot of them out. If they're gonna, you know, give up based on my personality and my stupidity, you know, because there is no such thing really as a mentor and a mentee. There's people who walk together.
Interesting.
If I'm not learning, that's the other reason I separate from people when I stop learning from them. Best relationships I've ever had, mentor and mentee, is when I'm learning in return for whatever I'm sharing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I remember you saying that, hey, I said, how, you know, don't underestimate or discredit how much value I get from this too.
Absolutely. We're all bozos on the bus, for crying out loud.
And I get it now. I get it now. Like, yeah, like I was talking to a guy, a very small maple farmer today, and he's like, your time, I don't want to use your time. And I'm like, you don't understand. I'm learning from you.
Yeah.
I'm learning what's needed. You're actually telling me in the market what's missing just by listening to you tell me what isn't on YouTube. And it's a huge void. I'm like, stop apologizing.
Very cool. Anything on that chat thing? I wish we had a call-in thing where we could talk.
Well, yeah, you know, just like what was it? There was a show. Wasn't Fraser Crane? Didn't he do a late night out in Seattle? The guy from Cheers had a separate show called Fraser, where at nighttime he did the radio. So by on a life, Kevin says Nate speaks Nate-inese. But I agree with you. I mean, Tim, this has been great. I hope we could do this again. I'm already hoping that we can do it again. So
oh, sure.
I appreciate it.
What I'd like to ask, if you invite me back, is to maybe have dialogue with your peeps ahead of time, or get where they can call in or something. I don't know, because I really hate just hearing your and my voice. I would love to hear.
Honestly, getting somebody like David on, I think would be so helpful. Like, I would rather have David jump on.
Let's do a three-way. Good idea.
Yeah, and have him be on it, because then it's such an advantage to be able to sit down and listen and hear, and then.
Oh, absolutely. Don't tell Kathy. Don't tell Kathy, Joe, but we could do a three-way.
David, yeah, just the ugliest one ever. Well, I appreciate it, Tim. I love you. I'm so thankful for your friendship and help. So, everybody, good night, everybody.
I love you, Nate.